So we'll get started. Was looking to see if more people were jumping on. It's kind of stayed the same here for a little bit. So I think we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Rounds, and I'm the coordinator of the Transition Services Liaison Project. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker. This is the Charting the LifeCourse Tools for Transition session. And we have Brenda Smith with us again today. And kind of a person-centered thinking guru. And we're happy to have you with us, Brenda. Again, for those of you that didn't listen to the introduction yesterday, I'm going to repeat it today. Brenda is from Sioux Falls and has been involved in the disability field for many years. She's a certified person-centered thinking mentor trainer through the International Learning Community on Person-Centered Practices. She is also a LifeCourse ambassador. Brenda provides training and consultation to families, educators, organizations, and agencies. Brenda's passion is to help individuals, families, and professionals envision and plan a good life for those they work with, teach, support, and care about. And again, Brenda, I want to thank you for providing sessions for us during our conference, and here it's all yours.
Hey, thank you and welcome everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be here again today and share with you the Charting the LifeCourse framework. It's a person-centered approach to planning and to problem solving, and it can be used at any age and stage of life to plan, to problem solve, and in any circumstance. And I have found that the Charting the LifeCourse framework is especially helpful at this stage of transition. That's a natural point in our lives where we are planning and thinking about our futures. So historically, the disability field and other service systems, health and safety has been a main focus. It drives the conversations that we have. And yes, okay, I just got a note that said, if my internet kind of pauses, let me know, please. But it drives the conversations. We talk a lot about health and safety for people. And while, for a student, it's important to address their health and safety needs as we plan for their future. But as we are helping students plan their future, their good life, we have to help them plan for a good quality of life. And it has to be about the whole person, the whole student. Now, all of us, if you think about yourselves, all of us lead whole lives made up of specific, connected, and integrated areas of our lives that are important to our quality of life. When we plan our lives, we think about where we're going to work in conjunction with where we're going to live, what we're going to do during the day. We think about how we manage our health, how we get what's important to us, our relationships, our citizenship, and our involvement in our community. And that's how I think we need to help students plan their future. So for this session, I have posted a number of handouts, and I'll just tell you what is included and what isn't. I did make a packet of some of the slides that I'll be presenting today. I did not include the whole presentation because there were lots of slides and I think about printing. But if you see that there's something that I did not include that you would like to have, please feel free to send me an email, and my address is, I think, on the last slide, my email address, and I will do what I can to send you what you request. Also, I did include some handouts that are electronic versions of some of the tools that I will share with you today. And one of those is an infographic that looks like this. Now, it's perfectly fine if you print it off to print in black and white, or if you'd like a colored copy, I can also direct you where to get those. All of the tools, not necessarily the examples that I'll share today, but all of the tools that I will be sharing are, I'll give you a website, and they are free and they are downloadable. And most of them come in electronic copies that you can just add information on your computer. So that works out too. So like Dan said, I have been working in this field for a long time. I've been doing person-centered thinking training for, probably 12 years, and other types of training. I've been working with charting the life course for about the last 5. And we use all of these tools in our own lives, mine as well as my son, who happens to have a disability and needs support, to plan and to problem solve. And I can honestly say they can help anybody at any age and stage of life. So those are posted. If you have any questions, let me know. I always feel like I have learned so much from the people that I've worked with, the opportunities that I've had to train, teachers, other providers, families, and self-advocates. But I feel like my greatest lessons have come from my own son within our, at our own home, because we've experienced a lot of the systems, the special education system, related services, VR, all sorts of different services and supports to help him live his good life. And I'll share some examples of him and others as we go on. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully things will go smooth. Feel free to have your cameras on. I like to be able to see people, and we've got the size of group that if you have a question, unmute and get our attention, and you can ask, and I'll be glad to try and answer those as best I can. So just a picture of my family. I have 2 sons. My oldest son is about 39, and my youngest son is on the far right, and that's Derek. And he is the one in our family. Well, we all need support, let's put it that way. But he has needed support throughout his life. So in the session today, I just want to provide for you the Charting the Life Course framework. It gives you an opportunity or a way to think differently. It can help you have different conversations. It can give you new ways to plan, problem solve, and do transition planning. I want to help you learn how to develop a vision with a student for their future using what we call a trajectory. And then I want you to learn to think about the supports and resources that are available to students to help them achieve their desired future. So all of this work, all of the Charting the Life course, is coming out of a national effort called the National Community of Practice for Supporting Families. As you'll see, South Dakota is one of the states involved. And actually, since that slide was made, there are lots more states that are doing this type of work in their different systems. So why was all of this work developed? And it came out of a group of people who were thinking about how do we support families and how do we support individuals, including students, to have good lives. And over the years, services and supports are evolving. So if you look at the concentric circles on the left-hand side of the screen, this represents all of us. We're all a person. We all live in the context of our families, whether we live with our parents or we don't. We have our own families, and we're all part of a community. If you look at the center circle, the set of circles, this represents traditional disability services. Let's say a person is born and identified as having a disability at some point. And we have typically wrapped services around them. And sometimes they have been a gateway, and sometimes they have actually been a barrier to them being part of their families or family, and also part of their community. And I don't want anyone to hear me wrong and think that services aren't good things. We need services, and we need to help our sons and daughters be able to learn and grow and develop. But services and supports have been evolving over the years to say if a person is born, has a disability, or anybody, we all need support. And those supports and services should be where we need them, when we need them, to enhance our participation with families and to enhance our participation in our communities. And so I want you to pay attention to those little colorful stars there, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Again, we need all sorts of different supports, including formal services, to have our good life. So this is one of the handouts that I did include. This is just an infographic that includes all the values and guiding principles of charting the life course. I'm not going to go through this in detail today. I'm going to focus on a couple of things due to the time we have. But some of you may be familiar with the trajectory, which we'll talk about today, and the integrated support star. But I provided this to you so that you can see that this whole framework is really guided by a set of values and principles that say, you know, all people need supports in the way that they need, want, and prefer those. All people should be able to plan and have a vision for their life. And we have to think about all areas of our lives and different ways of providing those services and supports. So you have that in that electronic document, and I may refer to that as we go on. All of this work is really guided by this core belief, and that is that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, play, and pursue their life's aspirations in their community. So I'm going to go back to the previous slide for just a minute. Maybe not. Let's go back one. And I just want to give you a couple of examples. When I think about those concentric circles, I think about my own son, who happens to be 35 now. So he's been out of school for a long time. And we've been trying to figure life out since then, kind of like his brother has. But when I look at that, I think about when I say that sometimes with the best of intentions, our services and supports have sometimes been a barrier. I think about Derek when he first got into preschool, and most of his classmates were all students who had disabilities, and then that changed too. But while he needed all those services and supports he had, he wasn't part of the typical regular preschool at that time. The next year it happened, but not right away. I think of some people I know as adults that in order for them to get the services and supports they need as adults, they've had to move from their community, from their neighbors and neighborhood and members of their congregation and other community members in their town to get the services and supports they need. And as we evolve, we're thinking about how can we provide people with services and supports they need wherever they choose to live or be. So one of the principles, and I want us to think about this too, because all individuals exist within the context of family. So we call this effort supporting families, but it also includes individuals and adults. It includes everybody at any stage. But we have to think about that everyone exists within the context of family. When my son turned 18 and he was 19, a focus really became on him as an adult, as an individual, and kind of, you know, us in the background. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's wrong, but we always have to remember that everybody still exists in the context of their family, whether they live with them or not. They influence us. They provide support to their family member. They are there long after people who have different roles in their lives have moved on to other places. So we always think about family defined by the individual, and it's not dependent upon where they live. So we want a good life for everybody. We want the person, the student, to achieve self-determination, interdependence, productivity, integration, and inclusion in all facets of community life. And we want families to be supported in ways that maximize their strengths and their abilities to best nurture, love, and support all of their family members. So let's talk about a good life, how to develop a vision using a trajectory. So this is one of my favorite quotes. I always think about the future is not something we enter, but the future is something that we create. And creating that future requires us to make choices and decisions that do begin with a dream. So when you're working with students, when we're working with people with planning futures, we have to know what we're aiming for. We have to know what their vision is so we can help them make the choices and decisions and the plan to achieve that dream. So, but I always say, you know, we're trying to help people plan for a good life, but what constitutes a good life and who defines what that life is? So I want you to think about yourself, and I want you to think about what's included in a good life for you, what would have to be present, and I want you to just write in the chat box what a couple of those things would be. What would have to be part of your good life as you define to say, boy, life is good if this is present, or this is what I'm trying to achieve. Start writing it in that chat box and we can start kind of developing a vision for what a good life is. Do you have the chat box or does it show up on my screen, Dan?
You can look at the chat box too, just click on it.
I don't see it.
Brenda, I can read them to you.
Okay.
We have family, health, active, family, faith, love, friends.
Okay. Everybody keep adding some of those things that you think about. Just another.
Yeah. Providing for my children and providing for my future grandchildren, financial peace.
Yes.
It's a good one, yeah.
Yep, so think about that. Financial security, we want friends, we want relationships with our family, we want to have families and provide for them. We want to have, when somebody says health, I assume it's, we want to have good health. You know, some people put, I want to be able to travel and do those things. And you know, all of us kind of developed that quality of life, and those are pretty universal outcomes for everybody. And those are the things that we should want for ourselves, our families, and our students, to have those broad universal outcomes of relationships, of financial security, of a home, and all of those things. So part of developing a vision is defining what that good life is. And another piece of developing a vision is defining a vision, is including a vision of what you don't want. So now I want you to kind of switch gears and think about the students that you work with. And I want you to think about, what don't you want for them? What don't you want to happen to them in their life or to have them experience? And I want you to put that in the chat box.
Bad health, poverty, loneliness, illness. No options, Melissa says. Exclusion, homelessness, incarceration, poor health.
And we could go on in both of those areas, the vision of what we want and the vision of what we don't want. And when I think about what you don't want for the students that you work with, are pretty universal things that most people don't want to experience in their life. And all of our work and all of our efforts should make, you know, that we should be putting forth is to help help people have the same things in life that we want for ourselves, and not to experience those things in life that we don't want to experience ourselves either in our family. So part of developing and creating a vision has to do with defining the vision for that person, what they want in their future and what they don't want. So I kind of put together, because I've done this quite a few times, and we usually have similar outcomes. You know, if you look in that, the vision of what I want, what I've got on the screen, and the vision of what I don't want. And I've included a couple others that I've heard. A lot of people take for granted that they have choices to make, that they can do things they want to and have freedom and control over their own lives in their good life. And what we don't want are those things that are listed. And others have said, I don't want my son to grow up and have no friends, not have opportunities for jobs, and have other people always making decisions, or maybe seeing them by only their label. So when we talk about trajectory, that refers to that arrow towards the good life vision. So along that trajectory, that's the path of reaching our good life. And in order to develop that vision, we have to think about what life experiences, what needs to happen for that person or the person to achieve their good life. And when we look at the dotted line across the bottom, that's the trajectory for things that are unwanted. And there, in that white space, we think about what are barriers? What are things that could happen or things that have happened that have taken a person toward exactly what they don't want? And this helps us frame conversations in a little different way. So I sent you one of these handouts, and this is what we use as a form for a trajectory. And it can help frame a conversation that you can have with students to help them develop their vision. You see on the top, there's the box, the vision for the good life, what they want, what they don't want, and then the trajectory. And then if we frame it as what action or life experiences will put you on your trajectory to your good life vision. And then we can talk about what experiences or barriers will take you in the direction of what you don't want. A couple of other things that I want to tell you about the trajectory is that you can start a conversation with anyone at any age and stage of life. If a teacher is working with someone in early childhood, you can develop a trajectory. If somebody is working with a young school age person, you can develop a trajectory. And I'll show you different ways to do that. When you're talking to a student in that area of transition, you want to learn, what do they have in mind for their life? What are they talking, what are they thinking about? What are they dreaming about? And it's much broader than saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do when you're finished with high school? That's part of it. But you can get so much more by framing this conversation. And then the what I don't want. Oftentimes we don't articulate that, or we don't ask those questions. And usually what comes up and people put in that box are things they've experienced that they don't want to experience again. Think about what we mentioned: loneliness, isolation, being bullied, having decisions made for us, those things. So then we can frame a conversation around, well, what are barriers that might come up that might put us on the path to what you don't want? And the top, we talk about life experiences. Now, one of the things that I seem to remember when Derek was going through this and going through school, and it's not about good or bad, it's just about remembering those things. We spent a lot of time talking about services. We spent a lot of time in the meeting talking about occupational therapy and physical therapy at times, and what other services, family support, or what other agencies could be involved. And those are necessary conversations. But we also, I think, have to take it a little bit beyond and say, what life experiences are going to put you on your trajectory to your good life vision? So let me go back to the previous slide. And maybe I didn't get there. Okay. So if we want, if having friends is part of our good life vision, then we have to go back and think about what experiences does the person need to have to be able to make and maintain friendships. So in this spot here under life experiences, I would be putting things like things that are relevant to them in making new friends. Learning how to initiate conversations and friendships. How to invite somebody to lunch, or things that I could talk about when I'm with a friend. Things not to do with a friend. So we talk about those experiences as much as we talk about later on the services and the supports to help make it happen. The vision of what I don't want, it's kind of like the loneliness, isolation, and we could put things here if the person has no friends, or maybe they don't have friends beyond the school day, or maybe they're experiencing some of that bullying now, or they don't get opportunities to make choices and decisions for themselves. So those boxes, or the space above the trajectory, focuses on life experiences. And I'll show you how you can think about those a little bit. So this just highlights some of the things as we think about over the lifespan. Because one of the things the trajectory brings to the field is to let us know and help us think about everything is connected. So we don't just start at, age 16 or 17, wanting to have a friend or making a friend. It starts much younger than that. It starts when we're in preschool. It starts when we play with our siblings and learn how to get along with others. Maybe there's play dates that help us learn how to get along and make and maintain friendships, or playing t-ball. Or maybe we have some social stories that help us learn. We learn about friendship. We experience getting along and not getting along, fighting with a friend, making up with a friend. We experience sleepovers or scouts and things like that. Those are life experiences that sometimes those students with disabilities haven't necessarily gotten at each age and stage of life. So this helps us think about everything is connected. We build and develop skills and abilities at different stages that prepare us for the next stage of life. So if I'm on a t-ball team and know how to get along and do things with other kids, I might at some point be ready to go on a sleepover or go to a slumber party or a birthday party, those sorts of things. So another thing, as we think about how we prepare for our lives by developing skills and abilities at different stages, is thinking about a job. We don't just get a job or get job experience because at 16, we are with VR and get to do project skills or have other job explorations and supports. Preparing to have a job comes much earlier in our lives, and we have to think about that. And we have to plan and prepare and develop those skills over time. So if you think about your kids, you think about yourself, at an early stage of life, you have to pick up your toys, you have to pick up your room. You have chores to do around the house. Maybe you have to take care of the pets, feed the dog, take the dog for a walk. Maybe it's your job to mow the lawn at a certain stage. But you have chores where you learn some of those work skills and experiences very early on. Maybe you learn how to purchase something in a store early on that you got from money from an allowance, and you had to plan for that purchase that you wanted to save your allowance for. Maybe you did some work or some chores for the neighbors and you made a little money, and you learned how to work for other people. You learned how to budget money. You got a part-time job when you get older where you earned and were able to save to maybe do something later. So it's developing those skills and abilities throughout our life that help us on our trajectory to a good life. One more I want to show you, and that's about health and safety. That's an issue for a lot of us that we think about. And we think about that a lot when our sons and daughters are getting to the age of transition and we're thinking about their life beyond school. But really planning and teaching them about their health and safety starts early on. As a young child, they learn what their body parts are. They learn about their body and boundaries, what good touch is and not good touch, and what good touch isn't. That we empower them to say no, that they can make some choices and decisions, that as they get older, we help them learn those self-advocacy skills. We teach them about sex education, and at different stages have access to counseling. So there are lots of things we can do to prepare for the good life for a person in all aspects of life. But we often always don't know what we need to think about and what we need to plan for. So just that is that format for a trajectory. So there are lots of adaptations that you can make to the trajectory to be able to suit your needs. And I'll be showing you some completed trajectories in just a little bit. So sometimes if I'm working with a student and we say, well, what do you want in your life? You know, and it's so big. Well, usually what comes out are those big universal life outcomes: a family, friends, someday get married, learn how to get around town, different things like that. And it gets to be pretty big, and it's hard to think about depending at the age and stage they are. So we can adapt, and you can adapt it to meet your needs. And this is just an example. I oftentimes will draw a line down the center in that vision for a good life. And I'll ask the person what they want in their future. And I'll back up and also say, well, let's talk about the next 6 months, so that we can have some short-term and some long-term goals that can help you identify not only what the person wants in their future, that the goals for transition can come out of, but also some action steps of things that you can be planning in IEP goals and objectives or activities at school or classes. And then talk about what needs to happen over the next 6 months for us to reach that vision, and what experiences or barriers will take you down the road of what you don't want. So you can adapt these, and please feel comfortable doing that. Another example is if I'm working in transition with a student and then we've got their family that's very involved, I'll draw a line down the middle and I'll talk to the student and find out kind of what their vision for their future is. And I'm going to ask the family what their vision for their son or daughter is. Because again, that's where both are important, both visions are important. And yet they can be very different. I'm looking at Cindy, and you can shake your head yes or no, Cindy, but I think, does your son always agree with what, do you guys always agree on what you want for his future? You can take your button off.
You know, I was just thinking of that. It seems like we do a lot, but is he really telling me what he wants? That's what I keep thinking.
Yeah.
You know, but no. Yes.
Yep. So it's interesting to have the conversation around the students because they think about things we don't.
Right. And we haven't done this for a long time.
Yeah. And family members think about issues that aren't necessarily on the front burner of a 16, 17, or 18-year-old student. So it's important to get that. Now, one thing I do want to mention, because people will often ask, where do we start the conversation? And it just, you know, you practice it a little bit and you'll start figuring out where it makes sense for you. So sometimes I will just ask, you know, what have you thought about your future? Like when school is over, what do you think in life should be part of your life? What should it include? And I'll start getting some things there. And I usually start with the students because I don't want the students to be overshadowed necessarily by the families. And then I'll just, you know, start the conversation with the family and find out. Sometimes I'll ask, what's a vision for a good life? And I kind of get a blank stare because it's like, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't know what to say. And if I tell you what my vision is, Are people going to look at me like I'm unrealistic? So what I often say in those situations is, start the conversation with what you don't want. And oftentimes people can come up with that pretty fast. I often will give the example of my own situation, and I remember this very vividly. Our son was leaving early childhood, going into elementary school. And so he was 6 probably at that time. And we were talking about, what's it going to look like when he goes to, is he going to go to kindergarten? Is he going to another classroom and then have opportunities to experience kindergarten? What was that going to look like? And in the middle of the meeting, and this was a full IEP team meeting, and our special ed director asked me what I wanted for his future when he grew up. And I was just stopped in my tracks, because there was a lot going on in his life at that time. Lots of hospitalization, lots of seizures, wasn't talking, wasn't toilet trained. I mean, let's go on, there was a lot going on. And I just looked at her and I was almost irritated that I thought, really? You're asking me what I want when he grows up and I can't even figure out for the next month? Now, it's an okay question to ask. Don't get me wrong there. It just stumped me. Because I thought, I can't even put into words. We're just dealing with the day to day. So I can't put into words. But I've thought about that since this. And I've thought about, but if she would have asked me, what don't you want for him? I could have rattled it off like that. Because I know I knew then what I didn't want. I didn't want him to grow up and be lonely. I didn't want him to grow up and have no friends. I didn't want him to experience poverty, have to be cared for all the time by somebody else, to not be able to make choices, to not have friends, to not have a home that he had control of. All of those things I could have listed off when he was 6 years old. But I couldn't put together the words for a vision. So if you try this conversation with a student and a family member, keep that in mind and approach the conversation in a gentle way. Well, what don't you want to happen? And then let's move up, and now let's talk about what you want in your life or your family member's life. And then talk about those life experiences. So I give you these examples as ways to say that it can be modified and adapted.
Brenda,
Yes.
we have a question.
Yes.
I think that fits in nicely now. Do you find that there's often a big difference or small difference between what the student's vision is and the family's vision?
I found both. I found the family that is very open if the person says, I want to be, I think Karen used the example of policeman yesterday. I, have that big life vision, and I find the family will say, that's fine. I want him to have a job that's meaningful. Knowing that, as the student has experiences, things kind of progress and things happen that make sense for the person as they go on. And I found that I always, when I said I asked the student first, because if I've asked the parent first, sometimes the student repeats that because they want to please everybody. And I found that happens. So sometimes people are on the same page because they've done different things to prepare for their future. And sometimes I found that the gaps are pretty big. And I'll show you a tool that we have that can be very helpful so that parents can kind of see where their child needs support. Is that helpful? Does that make sense? Okay. So I just want to show you at a young age, and this is an actual student's trajectory. I got a call one day, and it was from a parent who was absolutely beside herself in tears. Kindergarten student, first week in October, and had gotten multiple calls from school. So I said, well, let's, I don't even know what to do. She said, I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to approach this, but what we did was we sat down and over a couple of, an hour and a half coffee maybe, we put together this trajectory. And we divided in what do you want for his future and what do you want, what would a good school year look like for this child? And we started to spell that out. What don't you want for him? And then we talked about some things in that, those experiences that needed to happen to help him have a good school year and a good life. Well, we completed this. She contacted the principal, started there, had a conversation, and it was a very constructive conversation. She said instead of her being kind of emotional and just kind of trying to defend her son, which they weren't, the school was being, was just trying to figure out how to help him too. Anyway, then they met with the classroom teacher and the aide that was in the classroom and had a really strong conversation from this that said, now we're all on the same page. Let's go back and identify specific things that we can do, actions that we can take that can help it be a positive school year. So it can frame conversations, help people initiate conversations because it's a very visual, it's easy to read, and you don't have to dig through a report or notes to get it. I want to give you an example, and this is a transition age student. The names have been changed. And I did not include these in your examples, but if you want a specific example, please feel free to email me. This is Jordan, and I want you to know that this is Jordan's team up there. I just added a text box and put on there who was all involved, and he had lots of agencies and organizations involved. And one of the things I was going to mention, when I sit at a table and a meeting with a student, family, and a team, I always have the student sit the closest to me because I don't want anybody in between me and the student. And that's because I want their attention, their focus, and I don't want them to see anybody else's faces or reactions when they're giving me information. I've just found their voice is much stronger when they're not trying to repeat from somebody else, if that makes sense. And my own son does that, and he still does that. And I like to think we've tried hard to help him have his own voice. It just happens. So anyway, you can see that what Jordan's vision was, and then you can see that his family had a vision for the summer and the next school year, and that and they also had a vision for his, long-term future, and what they didn't want for him, and Jordan participated in that. And then you look on the left-hand side up above the trajectory, and you can see some of the experiences that they identified that he needed to have to be on that path toward his good life vision. He needed to have some work experiences. He needed to get paid for some work, so they were going to be starting project skills. He could do some volunteering and have the support that he needs. Have different social roles with the assistance with the team. Learn to keep himself safe while spending time alone. Internet and computer safety skills, decision-making. You can read the rest of those that are on there. But from that conversation, and that was all from just a conversation of getting that vision of a good life. And then those activities could inform some of the team's IEP planning at school and some of the transition goals. And then we talked about what is going to take him down the path that you don't want. And his mom talked about other people sometimes having low expectations for him, or having limited or few options or opportunities. How could we expand those? To not be around people and friends, have isolation, which he experienced in the summer and after school, and to not have the supports he needs. So we had to really talk about supports. Any questions or comments so far about the trajectory and using it in this way? Now, I adapted this and put them in the chat box, and then Cindy, you let me know. But I also attached this. added this because I wanted, when they shared it with somebody, I wanted them to see all of those positive qualities that people like and admire about him. I wanted those strengths to be at the top. And I wanted them to see what really mattered to him, what's important to him that he had told me. So I put the what others like and admire. And now the format that I have shared with you in the handouts is an electronic form. But before we had those, I would take this form and I would put it on a PowerPoint slide and add text boxes and shapes. And you can do it that way as well. To customize it, sometimes I'll add a picture up in the corner just so that if it is shared with somebody, like, you know, it could be shared with the VR counselor, could be shared with a family support person if they aren't participating, or it could be shared with a general education classroom teacher that they're taking a class from, so that they see this is what we're aiming for, and that teacher is going to be part of what's going to help him on that good life path. Were there any questions?
Brenda, there was a question in the chat box.
Okay.
Do you find that there's often a big difference or a small difference between what the student's vision and the family's vision?
Oh, we just did that one, right?
Yeah, that was the one that I had
Okay.
we talked about 5 minutes ago.
And it can be either. It kind of depends on the relationship and the expectations that parents have. And I could do a whole day on expectations, but from a family perspective, but I won't today. This is another student that we started a little bit younger because there was really kind of a disagreement about what was going to happen the next school year. And so in order for the parent was kind of quite all over the place at that particular time because she disagreed with kind of the direction that they wanted to go. And I said, you know, and her conversation with me was kind of all over the place. And I thought, whoa. So let's sit down. I'm going to ask you some questions and we're going to put it on a trajectory so that we can organize your information, that it doesn't just come from a reaction, but it really comes from being thoughtful about what your son's vision is for his life and what your vision is for his life, and what he doesn't want in his life and what you don't want for him. And we started putting that down. Now, whoops, sorry. Now, on the left-hand side, you'll see in the black print on the screen, these are the things that have taken place that have been really good, that have helped him on his path to that good life. He was included in a lot of elementary classes up through grade 6. He was participating in band and church and went to the gym 3 days a week to work out. He'd been in general education classes. He was playing basketball and he had chores at home. Those are some things. Now, if you look on the up here on the light blue, those activities, those are things I said, well, what do you think needs to happen to keep him on that path? Well, he does need to continue to have some general education classes with his peers. We want him to go to confirmation and go to church camp. We want him to continue to be in band and explore other groups to get other interests, to volunteer, to play sports, to continue to do chores. So they were talking about what they think needs to happen. And then they looked down at the bottom. They identified the things that they've experienced that they thought would take him down to the path of what they didn't want. If he was always in a separate classroom, how would he make friends that would go beyond school life and school day? If people didn't have some big expectations or higher expectations, could they envision what we have envisioned for him? And so she used this completed trajectory to take to her meeting at school and to say, you know, let's continue this conversation about what next year is going to look like, but I want to share this with you. Because we're thinking about him in his current situation, and we're also thinking about him when he no longer has school. what we want for his life, but we have to start planning and plotting a path for that now. And it really helped people really see that it just wasn't kind of this, I'm just disagreeing with you because you're not doing what I want. It was really based on having a bigger vision for him. And it was a much more productive type of conversation. And everybody was on the same page. I want to show you an example of another way that you can customize a trajectory. And I do have a form for this. I did not include it in the handouts, but can certainly share it. And this was of a young person that wanted to get a job. And so we kind of started talking around, well, what's your vision for work? What do you want and what don't you want for a vision? And so it ended up looking for part-time work, did want 5 days a week. To this person, it was important that his job have a uniform. To him, that gave him some status, that he had seen people, his dad had a uniform, and he really liked that. And he wanted to be able to have a job that he could work at, that he didn't have to have ongoing support. So it's something that was a good match for his skills and abilities. If you look down in that what he wants, we also put conditions there. Because knowing him, people who had worked with him knew some things that wouldn't work. Didn't want a fast-paced environment or a job that involved being around children. Likes his niece and nephew, doesn't like to be around kids. They're unpredictable. His preferences was to be around people, so he didn't want a job that isolated him, and something close to home because his parents, he relied on his family for transportation. We also knew that his support needs were that you had to demonstrate work tasks with verbal instruction. So you couldn't just tell him a task. Everybody who's worked with him figured that out. You can't just verbally give him things, you have to show him how to do things. And that you can't give him like a 10-step direction. You have to give him no more than 2 steps. So people have a good idea of where to start in helping him find a job or look for work. What he didn't want was full-time work or to work in isolation. And he said he didn't want a job that includes cleaning. And his parent kind of voiced that same thought because she knew what his room looked like. And so there was something else that he kind of had interest in. So some of the things that need to happen were, they listed some of a couple of his skills and what needed to happen in order for him to realize that part-time job. And then people not listening, people making assumptions about him, and people having low expectations based on some papers, some assessments, and so on, that he didn't score very well. And so this was put together, and this was taken to a VR counselor to help guide their work. Now, having something like this gives a counselor a different starting point. It starts a different conversation. And a VR counselor can use this type of thing to learn about the vision as well. Any thoughts or reactions or questions? Yes.
Brenda, there is a couple of questions. For this employment trajectory, would you also suggest in starting off with what you don't want?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because, if they've had any experience, or they volunteered or something, they might know. But yeah, I would put that, I could start that either place. You know your students. And so, you can start either place and no harm done, no foul. But if you're not getting information, move to a different place.
It's kind of like when you ask a student, tell me 3 things you're good at. Oh, they stammer. But if you ask them, what's 3 things you're not good at? Man, they can answer that like crazy.
Well, and I'm the same way.
Yeah,
I
that's
can much easier tell you my faults than I can.
right, or what you don't want. Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple other comments we had. Melissa mentioned this would be great to utilize with the summary performance when a student is graduating or aging out.
Oh,
And then
good thought.
yeah, I know. And I also thought, man, all of these things that are listed on here, they can go right onto the transition service activities page or goals or whatever. I mean, it's just meshes with the IEP so well.
Well, and I found the visual piece helps a lot of people and mostly helps the student in my
Right.
head. Because I guess I've always wanted students to be involved, to take some ownership, to have that, develop that self-determination. But if everything is just kind of talked about, but there's not a format that makes sense to them or that they can speak from, it's kind of hard to do that. But I have found that students can speak from this. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of another way that we use trajectory, and this is of my own son. We had spent years, a lot of time and effort. Think about Jenga, building a life, trying to get the supports he needs, the place to live, the job, and so on. And on March 13th, for all of us, and maybe it was a day before, a day after that, that Jenga that we had perfectly, built kind of came tumbling down because COVID happened and he no longer could go to work. He couldn't volunteer. His routine had just fallen apart. And after a couple of days of our shock and wondering how long is this going to last? What are we going to do? We sat down and we actually recorded the whole process, and we do have that available on YouTube, but I'm just going to explain. We used a trajectory to say, we need to have a new plan. We need to have a new routine for the next few weeks or months, however long this lasts. But it's got to be based on what matters to him. So we developed a trajectory based around that, a vision of what he wanted during this time and what he didn't want. And then we took that and say, how is that going to happen? What needs to happen so that we can develop this new routine? He can still have things that are important to him in his life. And how can we avoid the things that he didn't want? And it's about a 20-minute YouTube video that I can share with somebody because it shows we just did a Facebook Live. It wasn't planned or anything. We just did a Facebook Live to facilitate the conversation, and it gives you a way of seeing how that conversation is facilitated.
Brenda, I'll see if I can find that on YouTube and then post it.
Look, Derek's trajectory for COVID. It should be someplace. Okay. So anyway, what I really wanted to show you more than what his actual plan is that you can frame this conversation around any topic. You can put it, the student's trajectory for the next school year, student's trajectory for summer. We can take any of these life outcomes that we want for people, and we can do a trajectory just on that one outcome. So if you think back on those universal outcomes, we could do a trajectory for somebody, if it was relevant to them, about what do you want in a friend, because we're trying to help you develop relationships. We can do a trajectory, I showed you, around employment and work. We could frame a conversation about the person's trajectory for independent living and frame that and say, what do you want? When we think about how you're going to live and where you want to live and what you don't want. So the trajectory I keep, wherever I go, I have them stashed in my bag. Because somebody starts a conversation, and I used to think about, I'd talk with parents I
think
went
we
away.
I think we lost you for a minute.
Yep, but I'm back, right? Okay. That just came about. I didn't even get a warning. So I used to rattle off to people lots of services, and they're good services and organizations that can be very helpful. But instead of doing that, now I framed the conversation as, tell me what you want to happen. Tell me what you'd like to see happen. You're having an issue with the school, or maybe as a teacher, you're having an issue with a family. Think about what do I want the outcome to be? What don't I want, and what's it going to take? What are we going to have to talk about? What are we going to have to identify? And it takes us to a different place and point. It takes a lot of emotion out of it, and it helps put some thought. And then I can help. Then actually the problem solving becomes very evident. And I'm not solving the problem, they're solving their own problem, but by framing those conversations. So sometimes if you end up kind of at the end of that conversation where somebody's not happy about something, just kind of take a breath, pull back and say, tell me what you would like to see happen. I can't guarantee, and what do you think it's going to take? Because sometimes what it's going to take too is the family learning out, there are things I have to do to plan and prepare. Okay, so when we think about life experiences, I did not put that in your handouts, but this is a downloadable copy. The reason I didn't put it in your handouts is because it's got a lot of pages, and I didn't want you to think that I expected you to print it off. But it's called the Life Experiences booklet. This one is specific to South Dakota, and it can be downloaded, and I've got resources at the end that you can get South Dakota's. But I just want to show you how it can be used. So parents, as well as sometimes at school, we think, what do we need to plan for? What are some of those experiences that this kid should have at this age to help them? And I don't even know what to think about sometimes as a family member. Or as school, you're mentioning a lot of things and it might feel overwhelming. So this is organized, and the framework is organized into those life domains. So look at all those areas of our life, because as I talked about in the beginning, this is how we think about our own lives. We think about what we're going to do during the day and where we're going to work in relationship to how we're going to live. We think about our friends and where we're going to worship or go to church based on where we live or based upon the church we want to go to. We have to think about how we manage our health and keep ourselves healthy and safe, and how we participate. So these are the life domains. They're all the areas of life that we have, and this is how this booklet is organized. So I just took a copy of, put on the screen one page. If I want to identify or think about what should we even be working on with my son or daughter, I can go to this life experiences book, and you can use it as a teacher, and you can say, well, let's look at the life domain of daily life and employment, which includes school or work. And then when I said, it also helps us over the life stage, I want you to look across the top at the different stages of life. And then there are questions that you can ask. So if I'm a parent and I have a son or daughter that's school age, and I want to start preparing them for work or school, I would go through some of these questions and see, do they resonate with for my son or daughter? Is that something they should learn and that we should work on? Are you sending me to the before or after school program, and what supports do I need? Am I learning about different jobs that my family has from my family and from teachers and others? Do you make sure that I have responsibilities at home, so I learn how to do chores and so on? And these can be really good questions to help kind of guide what people should think about. So let's look at the transition age, and that's up at realizing that school is almost over. So if I have a student that's in this stage, I would kind of go through these questions to see if there's relevance to the student that you're working with. I would have the parent read through those, have this booklet and have them read through those so that they knew what they might be asking to work on. Now we know that everybody develops at different ages or different points. So sometimes I encourage people to look at the stage before and the stage ahead, depending upon the student. But it'll give you an idea of what you need to. Maybe I have a student that's in that 5th, 6th grade range that I would suggest that a parent go ahead and look at what we should be working on at the age of transition. It gives us some of that anticipatory guidance that we can use when planning. So,
Brenda, this is Cindy. What are the stars at the end of some of the questions?
you might understand that doing my being will help me get a job that I like someday. That I can't tell you.
Oh, okay. I was just curious. Some have it, some don't.
Some have it and some don't, and I'm not sure why. It'll come to me maybe. I noticed that too. So these aren't the be-all end-all of questions. They're conversation starters. They're things to think about. Very helpful, I think, would be helpful working with parents to have this information that, it's kind of talking about what the person's skills are if somebody identifies something that they'd like you to work on at school. Okay, so that booklet's available. All of this is in there. We'll give you a link to that too. Then I did send you this in your handouts, and this is a focus on transition to adulthood. The Charting the Life Course people have put together some guides. They call them quick books, and this is one on transition. So this actually goes through those life domains and puts some of the questions in each domain around transition, about daily life and employment, about where they're going to live, about what they need to address to keep themselves healthy and safe. And so this one is in your handouts. You can print it off and you can, share it with parents. It's less overwhelming than the whole booklet, and it's only focused on transition. There are other quick books that are available on the website too that you can download. What time are we at? Cindy?
I'm sorry, I had to unmute myself. We are at 11:23 and we go till 11:45, correct? Yeah.
So I'm going to show you one other thing before I end. And that's
you have about
20 minutes.
20 minutes left.
Okay. So this is just another example of a trajectory, and I believe I sent that, and it's free and downloadable too. It's called an expanded one. So it has the typical vision and what I don't want, but it gives you boxes to talk about what have you experienced that has worked, that is helpful, that has kept you on a positive path or your life path. What future ones do you need? And then you can have a conversation about what experiences have you had that haven't been beneficial and what potential barriers exist. It's just another expanded way to develop the conversation. This is an example of a 17-year-old's where we use this expanded version. Whether you use one or the other, it's totally up to you. You can experiment with some. You can watch that you can see of the information we've gathered. And I think about, yesterday Karen talked about individualizing, and that's what these tools do. And then when you develop those post-secondary goals or and so on, you can think about, well, do the goals that we're talking about writing, or do those outcomes that we're talking about writing, do they relate to their skills, their interests, their preferences? And this can be helpful in doing that. Okay. I want everybody that interacts with a student or an individual can impact, and they do impact that person's trajectory. You know, we can be the people that kind of take them down the path of what they don't want, and we don't even realize it sometimes. Or when we know what they're aiming for, we can be that champion and that supporter that can help them by identifying those skills and activities. So I just want to reference the integrated support STAR, because this to me is part and parcel. In order for people to achieve their good life outcomes, their vision of their good life, they need support. We all do in our lives. And those little stars there, this is an expanded star. Every point of the star represents a different type of support. So we look at a person's personal strengths and assets. We look at technology as a potential support. We look to the community. Are there resources and places in the community that can help the person? We look at the people they have in their lives. And finally, we look at the eligibility specific resources. That can include, you know, SSI, Medicaid, book rehab, special education, and so on. Oftentimes, we problem solve. And like I told you before, this is how I used to problem solve. Somebody had an issue, I would go right here. And I would tell them about family support. I'd tell them about voc rehab. I'd tell them about special education, and so on. And if it wasn't a service that was going to do it, we often thought of it being then, well, there's only natural supports, and we usually thought about that as family. The support star helps us think much more broadly about supports. That there are other places maybe we can organize a lot of different supports, just like we do in our own lives. So by focusing just on the eligibility supports, we kind of end up pushing the person down the path of what we don't want, if that's all we focus on. If people only rely on their relationships for support without those other eligibility-based and other types of supports, we also put the person at risk of going down the path that they don't want if they only rely on their family or parents. So there's two ways to use the STAR: by exploring or mapping the person's current supports, and we can use it to problem solve almost any circumstance or situation. So, and this is in your notes because I wanted you to have those guiding questions. And you have the blank integrated support STAR in your handouts that's downloadable. But if we use it for exploration, I would start with the student and I would identify the skills and abilities that they have. I would look at the type of technology that they're able to use, and that's low tech or high tech. Could include a smartphone, an iPad, a computer. Maybe it's a calendar. Maybe it's a whiteboard calendar. Maybe it's a certain app, but maybe it's a smart TV or an Xbox. A microwave, a coffee maker. They're quite, electronic right now. And then I would map out the places in the community that are their go-to places, the places they like to go and they spend time at, what bank they use, or what grocery store is close to them, what church they go to, do they go to a library, what store do they like to shop at, there would be the gym they go to. Then I would identify the people that are in their life, family, coworkers, friends, classmates, church members. And then I would map out what services that they're currently receiving and eligible for. And then what I would do, and let's see, okay, this is just an example. Actually, this is Derek's example, because once we made his trajectory through COVID, it felt like everything was back on us as his parents. And so we mapped out his current resources and supports to say, no, even through COVID, we still have resources and supports. and we mapped them out, and all of a sudden it felt like, oh, it's not just up on us. We can look at other people in his life for him to connect with and maintain relationships. He's got some good skills because he can use technology and use, he can still do his grocery shopping. He'll just do aisles online because he can use that. He can shop online with support from us. He can use his Wii Fit and do some of those apps. He can play PS4. He can listen to his music. He can connect with other people because he can use technology. He liked to go to church, but now he can do that by using technology. So we then had to organize his routine by looking at his trajectory and then saying, is there a way? Church is so important to him. Let's look at his support star and see. It's celebrate and embrace. He likes a couple of churches, and he can participate online. He works at Great Life, and he liked to work out there. Well, he couldn't go there, but is there somebody in his group, his relationships, that he could connect with, and that he could then go over to his computer skills? Special Olympics offered some opportunities to connect and to work out on their website. So we could plan based around knowing what his current supports are. If there's any questions, let me know. I'm just going to kind of keep going. Here's an example of Noah. Noah was the young man who we had the expanded trajectory. We mapped out his supports. And so we got an idea of things in his life right now that could help him. There's another way to use this support star. And it's the same way, but you divide each area into two and you map out their current supports, what they have now, and what future ones you want to develop. So what does he qualify for now, but what are future eligibility specifics? And I think of a transition student, I think, well, maybe they're getting special education and related services. Maybe they're getting family support. Maybe they're applying. And then the future ones might be applying for SSI, might be applying for their housing voucher, might be future supports applying for VR, but it helps us think about and capture the current ones as well as the future. And that's the same way in each area. What are current skills he has right now, but what are ones he needs to develop? Okay. And this is an example of a young man that I worked with recently. His name has been changed. But you'll see that his current supports and his future supports. He needs more friends and people in his life. And so he wanted to develop those. Some of the skills that he has now and some of the future things that he wanted to focus and work on. Same way in the current of technology and of the future. And the places that he likes to go now and some future ones. And then look in his eligibility based. But if we have, if we think about that one that I had showed you that said, if we only focus on the paid supports, they're at risk. And I say, if he only has a green life, they're at risk. If he only has a purple life where his family, he's at risk. Our work should be focused around getting him a colorful life, supports from lots of different areas. Think about how we problem solve. We take our strengths. We might use technology. We might call a friend that can do something we can't. We might hire somebody in the community that we can't do. We all get supports in a variety of ways. Okay, let's see. I gotta go previous. Okay, so there's a problem solving star. That's another way that we use this. So we look at what you want to solve. What's the situation? And we ask these guided questions. So what skills or abilities do I have that will help me with my problem, that might help the situation? Is there technology I can use that might help me? Are there people that might be able to help me? And you go around the star and focus on that specific problem. Now let's see if I had a... So I'm not seeing it there. But let's say, for an example, we wanted to problem solve and we wanted to say, finding a job. I would type that in the center of the star. And then I would go around and we would problem solve that way. Can I find it? What skills and abilities do I have on my own to find a job? What are skills that I have that'll help me get a job? What technology can I use to find a job? Can I look online? Do I apply online? Are there places in the community I could go to find a job, or where I might look for a job? Are there things I qualify for that would help me find a job? And do I know people who could connect me to a job? So all of a sudden you have more resources than just one. I could put learning how to cook in here and do the same thing. I could put finding an apartment or a place to live. Making friends, I could put that in the star and focus on that by asking those guided questions. I could put being included at school. I could put that in the center and I could problem solve around that. Heck, I think somebody also put paying off my student loans and tried that. We've often done kind of stump the star, put a circumstance in there, and you get, instead of just getting one way, one option, you might have lots of options in terms of problem solving. And this is how I like to teach families and individuals how to problem solve. So I'm gonna, on the back of your handouts, I'm gonna stop the share. I'm gonna go back to the, did I lose you?
Nope, we're still here.
Okay, but I'm just seeing.
Cindy, while she's looking, we should probably verbal the code word.
Sure. Okay, I have put it in the chat box, but just in case if you missed that, the code word is stages. And also, Melissa from State Special Ed mentioned that special education programs has lifespan folders that Brenda was talking about available. So just contact Melissa, and if Melissa puts her email in the chat, that would be great. She did comment though, while supplies last. And I think a sleeve.
Are you back?
Did we lose Brenda?
I think Brenda froze up again.
Also, there's, the link on there to go and evaluate Brenda's presentation, and the link to where you put your code word in.
Yeah, I think we lost Brenda.
Well, not bad for the last 5 minutes. Good time if she has to be lost.
Okay, am I back?
Yes, you are back.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Anyway, I'm glad we've gotten this far through, but were there any other questions or comments? Like I said, I've used this to plan with my elderly aunt for assisted living, nursing home, and hospice. I've used it we used it, my husband and I, to plan our next 5 years. You can try it on yourself. You can plan, somebody used it to plan their retirement, to plan their career path. But for students, the thing that I really like is that the visual pieces are very engaging. And I think that they help give the student family a stronger voice. And I think help you frame conversations with families and individuals as well. Any thoughts? Or comments? Yeah.
I was just going to mention at our Let's Talk Work event that we had last year. Well, for the last couple of years, we've done employment trajectories, and we've just taken big pieces of tag board and made groups working together, and it's really been a fun activity. But I wanted to ask you, you said when I work with a student, when I meet with a student, so you sit down directly with students and complete this? And
I have.
Is that through parents asking you or schools or what?
Mostly the direction has come through parents for me, but I would love, we've had what's a Good Life group online to help teach parents some of these skills. I would love to have a Good Life group for teachers to say, let's meet for 3 times virtually, and let's practice doing some of these so you can learn how to facilitate those. We're really open through our community of practice to doing that kind of thing. Because it's one thing to hear and see examples, and then you go to try it. And it's
Right.
like, oh, I'm not quite sure where to try it. Nobody's going to get hurt from a conversation around these topics. And so I say just try it. And then if you want some feedback, if I got interest, I'd certainly be willing to start an online group. I just worked with a young lady who finished school, did not have services, but was just kind of stuck and not able to move on. We did it all virtually by Zoom in this area of COVID. So while this kind of limits opportunities, it also expands opportunities to not have to be in the same location or community to get information. So if anybody's interested, please feel free to reach out, and whether we got a group of 2 or 3 or 4, whoever shows up are the right people at that time then. Any other thoughts or questions? Do people see where this could be useful to them in school and could help them? Since I can't see you, give me some sort of, since most people are behind their screen. What's that?
I said give a thumbs up.
You think it can be useful? I just hope that you give it a try. I've been, like they said, I've been in the field a long time, and I've been involved with this for 5 years or so, but this is some of the most exciting tools that I have seen come along that has such a universal application.
I think it depends on the students and where they're at. Like some students need those visual kinds of things, and some students, it's better just to have a conversation with them. However, those frameworks are kind of nice. I've especially used a lot of your guys' stuff that comes with like the good day, bad day kinds of things with students.
Yeah.
Those have been really helpful. Sometimes our kids can't see far ahead, and this changes very, very frequently. It's sometimes you can get it written down and it's something visual that they can look at, because their ideas change 20 billion times in high school, is what I find. Like oftentimes, sometimes some of my kids have changed what they want to do 2, 3, 4 times a school year, which is okay. That's okay. But I mean, it's just that whole thing that, hey, you told me you wanted to do this. Well, this is where we wrote it down. Let's go look at that. That's kind of,
that's why I like now that they have the electronic copies, because it's much easier to go back and make changes, because lives aren't static.
No.
Some of the ways that people have been using this is people are advocating for the supports they need to accomplish their goals with this. Some parents are setting higher expectations. Students are learning how their life experiences impact their goals, because there is a visual for it. Parents, siblings, family members share their hopes and fears. Case managers are using this in planning meetings. Teachers are using it to improve social skills at school, home, and the community. They're using it with aging parents. Employment specialists are enhancing discovery and exploration. Options counselors are providing that anticipatory guidance. And it just goes on and on. So I hope you can tell that I have great enthusiasm for it and would certainly love to share any of the resources, examples that I do have.